Are you tired of getting rolled by heroes like Doomfist, Tracer, Genji, and Sombra? Well, fear no more, you've come to the right place. This video is a simple 4-step framework that I, a tier 3 semi-professional coach, developed, called SPAR, which helped my Flash Ops team get top 32 and push some of the best contenders teams like Hypnos to their brink. But if you also play dive heroes like Winston, Doomfist, Genji, Tracer, and more, keep watching because you also get the counterplay to each of these stages. So the first, shortest, and simplest stage is called Scouting. If you don't know what Scouting is, it's literally just gaining information about the enemy team, but in this context, it's specifically referring to where the enemy team are. As Overwatch League coach Commander X explains here, what the dive comp wants to do is to leverage their mobility to take multiple different angles and surround the targets or your team. This is basically called staging.
So they want their dive squad, whether they're playing Winston, Tracer, Echo, or Genji, or Sojin. They want everyone to come from slightly different angles if they can, and all converge on the same point at the exact same time, ideally behind a nade from their Ana, onto someone like our Baptiste, and if they arrive on similar timing and they hit the nade, it's so hard for us to survive.
But with good scouting, you can spot this early and potentially poke them out, messing up their staging. My Echo player does this here on Suavasa, but I'll play the full clip in the next section and you'll see why. But how do you scout on less mobile heroes? Well, on Sigma, you can do something quite cheeky. In between your hyperspheres, you can actually flick your camera around to see if there's any enemies flanking around you. You can also play distance and have a wide FOV to see more of the fights. This also means you have more distance to poke from, and that leads me onto the next stage, the prevent stage. Before I continue, if you want to get the best private coaching around, hit me up in the link below and check out my private coaching to see that I'm the real deal. The prevent stage relies on one thing, range. This is key because against most dive heroes, they will have less range but more mobility than you. And you might say, but what if I'm playing Reaper or Brig and I don't have any range? Well, don't worry, that'll be explained in the next stage. So how do we leverage our range here? Well, it's simple, shoot them foreheads. Now it does sound kinda dumb, combined with the prior stage, this can really mess up a Tracer who's trying to set up for a dive. But where do you shoot them from? Obviously, not from the same angle, and I'll explain this in Suavasa. It would be a mistake for all 5 of you guys to play in this sort of zone over here, and then the enemy dive comp that plays around like this sort of zone, maybe they send a Tracer to go behind you guys, and then you get pincered, right, when they dive in. The reason why this is bad is because from this sort of position, all your damage is coming from one direction, which means it's very easy to avoid that damage with one piece of cover, right? Instead, it would be better to send your more mobile heroes to take deeper angles. Your Echo Mercy play here, your Genji could play the zone over here, right? And the reason why they can play these sort of deeper angles is because they've got mobility, right? Which allows them to escape whenever they want to, and I'll explain that in the Absorb stage next. But what if you're playing like Hanzo, Widowmaker, stuff like that? Well, it's very important to like not stack, right? So you don't want your Hanzo and your Widowmaker playing here, you don't want them playing here. But you also don't want them really playing these deep, hard angles into dive, because they're completely isolated from your backline. Instead, you want to find like a happy medium, a happy balance, right? So they would normally be playing like these sort of like zones here, right? Where they've got angles onto the enemy team, but they're also like not too far away from their other support, right? Like they can just kite back here and then get healing from their Zen and their Mercy and whatever, right? I thought I'd also briefly explain the push-pull dynamics. I'm not going to go into as much detail as other coaches like Commander X and Capitology, both of you are professional coaches who I highly respect, but I'm going to quickly explain how that would sort of work here. If the dive core push the Sigma Zen, then your Mercy Hanzo Widowmaker would try and push onto the dive core's backline, right? So that basically means trying to get a trade out on, you know, the Brig Honor or the Lucio Kiriko if they're running that. Just trying to get a trade, and in the meantime, your Zen and Sigma are going to pull and try and live for as long as they can against the dive core. That's how that sort of dynamic would work there. Again, check out Capitology and Commander X for that. On to the next bit. But also, this involves landing and using critical cooldowns. In particular, stuff like Ash's Dynamite, Mercy's Damage Boost, Echo Stickies, etc. So make sure you're not just spamming it out because you can, and instead, do think thoughtfully about your cooldown usage. Heroes that thrive in this stage, as stated before, are ones with Omega range. So your typical snipers like Hanzo and Widow, but also Ash, Sigma, Zen, Mercy and Echo. If you're on Widowmaker and you hit a headshot onto a Winston, he cannot dive. But do note that these ranged heroes make a big trade-off, and that's in their lack of sustain, which is explained by the next stage, the Absorb stage. The Absorb stage involves living, stabilizing, and pulling away from their dive. And the heroes mentioned prior, like Zenyatta and Widowmaker, are not really good at doing this. Still, there's a few tricks you can use up your sleeve, as I'll show, but there's also heroes who can do both the Prevent and Absorb stage, basically meaning that they have both the range and sustain. Bastion, Cassidy, Mei and Torb are the main candidates here. They all have range damage options to pressure out flankers beforehand, but also defensive cooldowns to actually live through the dive. Bastion's top form, Cassidy's roll, Mei's wall and ice block, Torb's overload, and the fact that all these heroes have more than 200 HP means that they're a lot tougher to kill. But with any hero in this Absorb stage, there are two universal keys. Always have cover to hide behind to help absorb some of the incoming damage, and have LOS2 supports. A good example would be a Brig Reaper, who can be a very strong duo to help melt down a Winston during a dive, since the Reaper has self-healing, Inspire healing, and Brig packs, and maybe even a rally to help him live. Same thing with the Sigma Mei, where Mei can get a clean wall, and Sigma just rocks the enemy tank. But heroes with mobility can also work too, because they can absorb the dive by just escaping. Junkrat with his mines, Sojourn with a power slide, Ashe with a coach gun, Hanzo with his wall climb, Genji with his dash, and Echo with a flight are all great examples. It's important to note that Ashe and Hanzo's mobility options are mainly vertical, not horizontal, and this leads me on to one of the tricks you can do to still live through a dive, even if your hero is still immobile, which is to leverage high grounds. You can spam the monkey here, and you're way safer, right? Because their Tracer can't access you. So again, probably a little bit micro there on J9's part, which means Storage needs to drop. So yeah, just dropping there, not playing high ground, and then also not TPing in time, I'd say. But overall, again, we played the Prevent stage pretty well. The Reaper dies, so... So what heroes do I choose then? Do I go full in for the Prevent stage? Do I do a little bit of both? Or do I go full in on the Absorb stage? Well, it does depend on the map. For example, on Colosseo, you could go anywhere on that spectrum from Prevent to Absorb. The map is very narrow and long sightlined, meaning you can get a ton of spam off with Zen, but the map also has a ton of cover, meaning Reaper and Mei can work. So my team just ran both, and we won the map. However, on Route 66, where the map is a lot more open, so your Mei can't get good walls, and where it's actually hard for your Zen to get an angle, heroes that still dish out poke damage, but have escape options, like Genji, Sojourn, Echo, and Kiriko, and to a lesser extent Mercy, would make more sense here. Brig Reaper would also be fine, and you can use the point as cover, but unfortunately, my team does not have a Reaper player. Now onto the last stage, the Rotate stage. This is what you do after the dive. The Winston's jumped out, the Tracer has used recall, the Sombra has thrown a translocator, and the Genji has dashed away. Now it's your turn to push up and punish them during this window. Here's a power over time graph to help visualize the whole process. Now this is going to be relatively oversimplified, right? But our comp, the poke comp, the red team's comp here, their graph looks like this, right, roughly. Blue team's comp, their graph looks like this. That's what their comp looks like, and if we sort of highlight each stage, this part of the graph is the Prevent stage, right? Because we've got more pressure. They're trying to stage their dives. They haven't pulled the trigger yet. They haven't got much ranged poke. They're not really, like, they're just playing in cover, ready to pull the trigger, right? This blue point, that's when they pull the trigger. That's when we want to absorb. And then after they've used their cooldowns, they're back at this low point, and again, we can rotate. Hopefully that's easier to visualize for people. So how do ultimates, well, affect this graph? Well, the ultimates don't really change that much. Pulse Bomb, Kitsune Rush, Primal, Beat, and Nano Boost, all they really do is increase the peak of this graph, or they just extend it out for longer. And all that really means for you guys is that your absorb stage is just going to be longer, and it's going to be harder to actually absorb their own dive. Now, you can combine the tips mentioned prior, and you can also pop your own ultimates to help this absorb stage over here. Stuff like Rally, Transcendence, Valkyrie, you should be able to live through this peak with those ultimates, and then you can go back to the rotate stage, and then push them on their downtime. So I thought I would just end off this video with some actual in-game examples of the 4-step structure going on here. and essentially what everyone's role is and how we actually play this quite well. We are the blue team, by the way. So as you can see in the comp here, the main difference is the involvement of the Sojourn over the Sombra. Again, this means that we have more natural poke damage, and the Sombra's really playing for that dive with the Doomfist and the Tracer. Basically, as long as we absorb the Tracer, Doom, and Sombra dive, and the Ana anti, with our Suzu, our Pax, and our Power Slide, and stuff like that, then we just push forward with our Sojourn, and because Sojourn has more poke damage and more range, we just naturally win with things like Railgun. The Tracer, Sombra, and Doomfist are getting ready to dive. We're not really playing much for the prevent stage here because we haven't got that much poke. We're playing a lot for the absorb stage because we've got Suzu, Repair Packs, Power Slide, stuff like that. And as you can see, we do a really good job here, right? So they get a dive here with the anti-nade. Their nade doesn't land, but it doesn't matter anyways because we would just Suzu it here. We slop up Suzu. And then we also get a good Brick Packs, good TP, good Power Slide away. He looks good, he's dropping down off the high ground using cover well. We're all using like corners, distance. This is really, really good absorb here from us. Absorb stage done, and they actually mess up that kite back in the rotate stage. So we've absorbed really well. Now we're in the rotate stage. Now we need to push up slowly. Obviously, just make sure we get our HP back before we actually feed up and push. But yeah, and the Ana gets a really good anti here, but it's already too little, too late, right? That anti needs to come when the Doom, Tracer, Sombra are actually already in. And yeah, we just walk forward. Sturgeon gets a nice power slide, and we just win, right? Because the dive's over. I thought I would just go through another fight here, and again, the absorb stage is actually really, really well done from us, and Matt Murray gets a really good power slide here that shows one of the concepts off about power sliding and utilizing high grounds. In the fight here, they actually have nano boost, so their peak is going to be higher, but we still do a really good job at absorbing. And once we absorb, we can just pop rally in the rotate stage and push up and win in a 5v4. Their Doomfist gets nanoed, bang, right? So there is the dive. The Doomfist goes in with Nano Boost, the Tracer comes in, the Sombra's got a good angle too. This is a fairly good dive. But as you'll see here, Matt Murray has a really, really good power slide to high ground there. Great Brick Packs by Keydog there. Good usage of cover as well, so he can kite back to safety. Yet he's also got a nice place to player as well, and has got LOS to Matt. So really good positioning from our backline, and Matt lives that dive. That is so key. And as you can see, our Doomfist Tracer, they're busy like disrupting the backline, so they have to pull back. And then we actually force rally, which is really, really good. So all we need to do here is just live, right? And we've done that. And then after we live, and Andreas can just pull back, we can pop our own rally, maybe live through this EMP, and then just push and win, right? Keydog really needs to pop rally here, right? Just pop rally, bash their Sombra dies, she actually wastes Translocator here, and if we just pop rally and their Sombra dies again, we just push in a 5v4 here, and we have more poke with Matt, and we just win. Fortunately, Keydog doesn't pop rally in times, which is really unfortunate, and yet he doesn't get the TP away, so we do mess up the micro there, but again, the macro is actually pretty darn good. So I thought I'd go through one more example here. This is actually an extended team fight, and the SPAR framework is applied twice here, as you'll see, instead of once. We could be doing a better job at the prevent stage, but we're actually doing a decent job here. The Tracer's half HP right now. Matt's in a good position to poke, but again, we're really playing for the absorb stage in this composition. And now there's the actual dive, right? This is the absorb stage, and as you can see, we're doing a really, really good job here with Andreas punching in and going in for this Sombra, right? Gets a really, really good punch here, and that means that it's really, really easy for us to absorb this dive, thanks to Andreas's disruption there on the Sombra. Right, and the Doomfist goes in, but again, it's only a Doomfist, right? He's got no teeth. And again, that makes it really easy for us to absorb. And now, I'd say we're in the rotate stage. The dive is over, and Connor's power blocking, he's got low HP too, and we even managed to get one on the enemy Sombra. All we need to do now is just live, get our HP back up, and walk forward and live. And we win because it's a 5v4, and we've got more sustain with Matt. More range with Matt, sorry. And we honestly probably win the fight here if J9 just doesn't feed. He goes in way too early, right? You can see he's so much ahead of Andreas here. If he just waits 5 seconds and then goes around this angle, and Andreas goes here, we just win the fight, right? So that's a bit unfortunate on J9's part. It goes in too early. But now we're back to the prevent stage, right? We're in a 4v4. And you'll see Matt does a really, really good job. Look how much poke damage. Look how much poke damage is on Ankon there. Really good prevent stage there. And now we're in that absorb stage, right? Because we have got a lot of damage onto Ankon early on, it makes it really easy for us to, again, absorb this dive, right? And again, look at where the enemy team are, right? They're all coming in one direction. Out, disruptor shots out, power sides out, we're all good. Packs onto Matt too. We pop rally. Again, we're just living. We're just literally living through the dive here, right? And they try and go back in with EMP and punch, but it's already too little too late. The dive's primarily in one direction, and we've got rally going too. So again, really easy for us to absorb. And sure, Matt does die here, but think about how expensive it is for the enemy team here, right? They've used EMP, Kitsune Rush, and Meteor Strike, and they've only gotten 1 kill, right? The enemy team really need to pull back here, wait out our rally, and then go back in with Kitsune Rush, and maybe they have a chance at winning this fight. J9 gets a really good stick onto Ancon, and yeah, the fight's already over at this point. Now we're in the rotate stage. Just push up 4v3. We can actually wait out the Kitsune Rush here, and then we're in the rotate stage, and then we can push up and rotate. I hope even if you're gold watching this, there are still some concepts you can apply to your own rank games, but also if you're in a high level team, I'm talking like high open division, tier 3 level, even tier 2, you can apply some of the concepts here, especially in the examples, and apply it to your own team when playing against dive comps. That's it, and I hope you enjoyed. Leave your feedback down below, and until next time.